It was a perfectly ordinary summer morning in the eastern Mediterranean. Clear skies, light winds, the kind of day that makes aviation look easy. But on August 14th, 2005, a passenger jet carrying 121 people quietly climbed into those skies, and then one by one, the people inside it lost consciousness. The pilots, the passengers, everyone. The aircraft kept flying on autopilot for nearly 2 hours. No one at the controls, no one answering radio calls. Fighter jets scrambled to intercept it, and when the fuel finally ran out, the plane fell. This is the story of what investigators would later call a ghost flight, and the chain of small, ordinary errors that made it happen. The Boeing 737 had a name painted near its nose, Olympia. It was operated by Helios Airways, a Cypriot carrier running budget flights across Europe. The route that morning was routine, a hop from Larnaca in Cyprus, a stop in Athens, then onward to Prague. Before any aircraft flies, it goes through a series of ground checks. That morning, a maintenance engineer performed a pressurization system test on Olympia, verifying that the cabin seals were holding correctly. During that test, he switched the pressurization mode selector from its normal automatic position to manual. When the test was done, he walked away. He did not switch it back. That single quiet oversight, a switch left in the wrong position, would set everything that followed in motion. At 9:07 in the morning, Olympia lifted off from Larnaca. 115 passengers, 6 crew, beautiful weather. The aircraft was functioning normally, and no one on the flight deck had noticed the pressurization selector was still in manual. In automatic mode, the aircraft manages cabin pressure on its own, keeping the air inside at a comfortable density even as the plane climbs to cruising altitude. In manual mode, the system does nothing unless the pilots step in. So as Olympia climbed, the cabin began to depressurize, slowly, invisibly, silently. 5 minutes into the flight, passing through 12,000 feet, an alarm sounded in the cockpit, a horn, loud, insistent. And here is where a small design detail became catastrophic. On this variant of the 737, the warning horn for cabin altitude too high, meaning the cabin is losing pressure, sounded identical to the horn that warns pilots they have not configured the aircraft correctly for takeoff. Same tone, same cadence. The only difference was context. Since they had already taken off, the crew almost certainly assumed it was a spurious takeoff warning, a nuisance alert triggered in error. Records indicate they contacted the airline's maintenance center to report issues with the air conditioning. They did not declare an emergency. They did not turn back. They kept climbing. At 18,000 feet, oxygen masks dropped automatically from the cabin ceiling, exactly as designed. Passengers would have reached for them in confusion. But by this point, the cabin altitude was high enough that hypoxia was already beginning to set in. Hypoxia is insidious. It does not feel like suffocation. It feels, to many people, like mild intoxication, a faint warmth, a pleasant fuzziness, a quiet sense that everything is fine. By the time you realize something is wrong, you are often too impaired to act on that realization. By 9:20 in the morning, just 13 minutes after takeoff, air traffic controllers noted that the crew's radio transmissions had become garbled, incoherent. Then, silence. Olympia leveled off at 34,000 feet and entered Greek airspace on autopilot. The flight management computer followed its programmed route toward Athens. There was no one left to fly it. On the ground, controllers tried again and again to reach the aircraft. Nothing. When an airliner stops responding and enters your airspace, you scramble fighters. That morning, the Greek Air Force launched 2 F-16s to investigate. At 11:24 in the morning, the jets pulled alongside Olympia at altitude. What the pilots saw through their canopies would have been deeply unsettling. The captain's seat was empty. The first officer was slumped unconscious over the controls. In the cabin, oxygen masks dangled from the overhead panels. Passengers were visible through the windows, but motionless. The aircraft was flying itself, carrying a plane load of incapacitated people in a slow, automated arc across the Aegean. Then something unexpected happened. A figure appeared in the cockpit window, one of the flight attendants. A young man who held a private pilot's license had managed to stay conscious, or regained just enough awareness to act. Using a portable oxygen bottle from the cabin's emergency supply, he had made his way to the flight deck. The F-16 pilots saw him appear at the window. He looked at them. He waved. He was not a trained commercial pilot. The 737 is a complex aircraft, and by the time he reached the controls, the plane's fuel state was critical. At 11:49, the autopilot disengaged as the aircraft began its descent toward Athens, following its programming. Then, one after the other, both engines ran dry and flamed out. He could not restart them. He could not save the aircraft. At 12:04 in the afternoon, Olympia struck a hillside near the village of Grammatiko, 25 miles north of Athens. All 121 people on board were killed. It was, and remains, the deadliest aviation accident in the history of Greece. Investigators worked through the wreckage and the records to understand exactly how this had happened. The starting point was clear. The pressurization mode selector had been left in manual after the morning's maintenance check. The ground engineer did not return it to automatic. But the investigation did not stop there, because a single forgotten switch only becomes a catastrophe when other layers of protection fail as well. The pre-flight checklist used by the crew included a step requiring them to verify the pressurization system setting. They either did not complete it thoroughly or did not recognize that the selector was in the wrong position. The cabin altitude warning horn, the one that sounded 5 minutes after takeoff, was the system working exactly as designed. The problem was that crews had no reliable way to distinguish it from a different alarm by sound alone. Two distinct and critical warnings sharing the same tone had created the conditions for a fatal misidentification. And then there was the hypoxia itself. Pilots receive training in recognizing it, often in altitude chambers where they can feel its effects firsthand. But the training has limits. The symptoms are subtle. The impairment is rapid at altitude. And the experience of hypoxia is, for many people, profoundly non-threatening in the moment, which is precisely what makes it so dangerous. The final picture was one that investigators recognize in major accidents, not one single cause, but a chain of smaller failures. A maintenance oversight, a missed checklist item, an ambiguous warning system, and the quiet, invisible physiology of altitude, each link connecting to the next, until there was no way out. Helios Airways faced criminal proceedings. The Cypriot government shut the airline down in 2006. Aviation learns from its disasters. It always has. In the wake of this accident, regulators and Boeing worked to ensure that pilots on early 737 variants would receive clearly distinct, unmistakable indications separating a pressurization warning from a configuration alert. No more shared tones for different emergencies. Crew training requirements for hypoxia recognition were reinforced across the industry. Airlines were reminded that checklists are not formalities. They are the last line of defense against exactly this kind of quiet, invisible failure. Maintenance protocols around pressurization tests were reviewed, so that a selector left in the wrong position after a ground check would be caught, through procedure, through sign-off requirements, through verification steps, before the aircraft ever reached the runway. The accident also prompted wider conversations about automation, about how an aircraft can be designed to keep flying long after its crew can no longer do so, and what obligations that creates for everyone in the system. The aircraft called Olympia was named for a mountain, the home of the gods in Greek mythology. On that August morning, it flew higher than any mountain in Greece, carrying 121 people who had every expectation of landing safely in Athens. What brought it down was not a mechanical failure, not a storm, not sabotage. It was something smaller and more ordinary. A switch in the wrong position. A warning misread. A chain of moments in which the right intervention never came. That is what makes accidents like this one worth studying. The lesson is not that flying is dangerous. Modern aviation, measured by the numbers, remains extraordinarily safe, in large part because of investigations exactly like this one and the changes they force into the world. The lesson is that safety is a system, and systems require every part to work. If this story stayed with you, there are many more like it. Subscribe so you don't miss them.